Hey everyone, welcome to Dekmantel Connects, the series of panels where we talk about a range of topics. But today the subject is how clubs and festivals influence art and culture. What role did clubs play in development of modern and contemporary art, and what role did art play in the development of clubs and of festivals? Depicting the continuing correlation between creativity and freedom of expression, and maybe also the need for a safe and secretive or subversive space in which to enact them. Considering the social and political and economic conditions that led to the advent of rave as a counterculture across Western Europe, as well as its aesthetics, ideology, and influence on contemporary art and beyond. And to talk about these topics with me today, I have a few beautiful people sitting at this table. Sitting over here is Kim Tuin, who is the director of Het Hem, a contemporary art and culture space in Zaandam, which is part of the larger area of Amsterdam. And then sitting next to Kim is Bas van der Poel, who is the creative director of SPACE10, the lab run or founded by IKEA to develop all kinds of new innovations. And sitting across from him is Zippora Elders, art historian and curator, but currently director of Fort Vijfhuizen and co-curator of Sonsbeek 2124, which we'll talk about later on, hopefully. And then last but not least, we have Lena Willikens here, who besides being a DJ also has a very thriving art practice. And I think my first question is that the title of this panel is how do clubs and festivals influence art? But I was wondering if it was going to be, should it be the other way around? Is it art influencing how we experience clubs and festivals right now? So I'm just putting that on the table. So, Kim, I wanted to ask you this question also because before being director at Het Hem, you were the director of Trouw, one of the most well-known nightclubs here in Amsterdam that had a very thriving art program as well. So how do you see the relationship between art and nightlife?
Well, I think they're very well connected. I think I see nightlife as a place where you can where you have a lot of freedom. It already lies in the darkness where you can just fool around. People can fool around at night. So you kind of forget who you are in daytime and you can be whoever you want in nighttime. I think for artists this is like a very good place to start your practice a little bit and test things. It's the most important testing ground I think there is. You can practice all kinds of arts. Of course, music is the most important cultural form that we have in nightlife, but also other forms of art, like contemporary art. I remember, for instance, that the Roxy, the owner of the Roxy, was an artist. It was filled up with artists like Rieneke Dijkstra, Gerald van de Kaap, you name it. There were so many. But also people like Jeremy Deller, for instance, who was in London doing the same thing. It was like really absorbing this whole club culture. And I think for artists, especially in the start of their practice, it feels like home. You can try things, you can fail, and you can fail without falling too deep, without being judged. And that's probably one of the most important things. I think that we also tend to forget now in these times, like as if nightlife is not important. We just close the clubs, but I get furious from that because it's, except for the whole thing with artists, it's also just for people to be themselves or find themselves or find their friends or life partners. Or nightlife is such an important part of, for instance, who I am.
Yeah.
And I think I can.
I think
say
that goes
for
for
everybody here
table.
at the table.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a list that we I mean. Also, people like me, or maybe Zippora, or who learn things from nightlife or start in nightlife and then eventually bring it to other cultural places. And it's an important, especially testing ground, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, I would say though, I think the difference, because you mentioned the Roxy as an example, which was a nightclub here in Amsterdam that ran up until when the founder Peter Giele, he died in like mid 2000s, I think.
No, 1999.
1999.
Yeah.
It was, you know, the one place in Amsterdam where especially house and acid house kind of had their first platform. But I think when you mentioned the artists that were connected to the Roxy, they were connected to the Roxy from the start. It wasn't a curated space in that sense. Do you guys think that nightlife in that sense has changed a bit? That whereas before clubs or, you know, underground clubs were these non-curated spaces, have now changed their roles a little bit? Maybe I should go to Lena for that.
I think, I mean, my background is definitely Düsseldorf, the Art Academy, and Düsseldorf as a city has a long tradition of where club culture and the art scene are kind of merged. It started with Cream Cheese, where like a little in the late 60s, a little concert venue and proto club actually run by artists also from the Art Academy, where they started to experiment with flicker lights and apparently invented the first strobe light. So like a really nice example how something which came from the art world is now a part of club culture. We cannot think of a club without strobe light, right? Or we can, but it shaped a lot of night experiences. And so I think for me it's something like how I grew up as an artist and also how I became a DJ. It was very natural to do it, and with also Salon des Amateurs run by artists, it was always something we do together. We show our work, but we also work behind the bar and play the music, and something very natural. When I think of clubs which are mainly designed for music and mainly have the best sound system and everything, like a dark room which is perfect for the listening experience, and then someone has the idea, like an additional idea to just like let's kind of accessorize it with art, then it can become a problem, in my opinion, because art can also I see it also as something fragile. You say like it's an chance for young artists, but it's a responsibility also not only for the artists but also for the ones inviting the artist to provide a good environment, as you would like provide a good sound for the performer, for the DJ or musician.
But then you combine it in one room, right?
Sorry?
You combine it in one room, you mean?
I think it's more about the
in
infrastructure,
general,
right?
it's not only about the space, but also about how you communicate with the artist, how you pay the artist, how you everything.
Yeah.
How do you also communicate that it is art? It's so often, I mean, to me and to all of us, maybe it happens quite often that you misread. Let's say you misread an party decoration. You think it's art, or the other way. You have a great piece of art, but you just misread it as party decoration. And
I totally agree upon that. But I think, for instance, how we did it in Trouw, because I think music is an art form too.
Yeah.
DJ is an artist too.
Yeah, I see.
So it's not always not always good to combine these things. And I think it needs their own spaces, and sometimes it's in the same space that they get their own spaces. But in Trouw, for instance, we decided on bringing art into the club because we had this amazing space downstairs that wasn't suitable for anything else, not for music. It was like acoustic. We couldn't do anything with it. So I said, this is an amazing art space, and that's when we called the Stedelijk Museum and said, like, okay, well, you know, in electronic music scene, we're here. Well, we want to collaborate with you so we can have like art forums that. And they were so into that. They were completely, I know Zippora from this whole process. She worked at the Stedelijk back then. And we just tried all kinds of art forms that would fit in the space. And I think you should always do that. You should never say like, oh yeah, it's just decoration for this part. But, you know, earlier, I've been in situations where video art suddenly started to be big, and that went very well hand in hand with the music. But it's not something that I would say essentially could be mixed always. You just have to take a good look at it. And there's always all kinds of art forms that really don't do well in clubs. You should not even try it.
Yeah.
No.
Maybe going back to your days at the Stedelijk, do you remember how that relationship was, and what was in it for the Stedelijk Museum, which is the Amsterdam Museum for Contemporary Art, to be part of this nightlife at Trouw?
Yeah, I think what was yes, of course. I think the Netherlands in general, there's a large history of video art and performance art, of course, and performance art that has been recorded, and you can of course now see the Oelaar exhibition at the Stedelijk, and I think it kind of comes naturally from that to work with video art and the relationship to nightlife and club culture, which is very evident, and also something that already happened in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and also in the 90s, and that is what happened back then. And I think it was 3 years with Stedelijk at Trouw.
Yeah, 3 years,
12,
and we
I
did
think.
different kind of art forms. Video was the basics, I think, but also sound art. We had like an amazing sound art show too.
That's so this combination, I think, is quite good, and also for the Stedelijk to, as a city museum, we should not forget that, stay connected to what's happening in a city, and also I think Trouw did a really great job in also kind of connecting many generations and people from different fields at Trouw, which was an amazing place, but also with the verdieping, you had this literally going into depth.
Yeah, the verdieping was the basement that
also
you were talking about.
The basement we're talking about. And I think for a museum, or in general, the more institutionalized art environment, it's good to keep that connection, and at the same time, going back to your initial question of everything becoming curated, this is of course like a challenge we're all in, especially as curators, to kind of not capitalize on resistance or the non-normative or the fluidity or the hybrid. And well, this is actually I don't have an answer to that. It's a challenge we're every day in, because we're all the time visible. So I think starting with the club, starting with not picturing everything, and you know, starting with when phones became very common, stopping that, I think this helped. But we are all part of something that is a system that is very big and very curated everywhere, which kind of changes our position as curators as well.
Yeah. I can imagine.
That perhaps also has to do with accessibility, right? Like, I mean, in general, art is more accessible through the emergence of smartphones, internet, and as well as music, right? Like you can just, instead of like buying a vinyl piece, it has become more accessible. So I think that's perhaps also the reason why suddenly, you know, like the club has become a formula, because there's less curation in that sense. Yeah,
and a commercial formula also. Yeah. Still, it is not. I mean, we're still somehow in a bubble. Also, in social media, we're in bubbles. I'm not sure if everything is accessible to everyone still. So this is still this notion of. You were mentioning Sonsbeek, where I'm working, and our topic is, our theme is labor and its sonic ecologies, and we're specifically looking at labor and what labor is. If labor can also be things that are not, valued with money directly, but is the labor of communities or undergrounds, or like all these kind of dissonant persons and scenes that are still doing their job, making this world like a more diverse and inclusive place.
Yeah, and it also connects back to what Lena said, that there's this responsibility, I think, in clubs as well, to take care of this infrastructure for the artists that you ask to be part of your environment. Bas, maybe because you come from a design background, and I wonder if you have a different view on this, like, because of course design is a more applied arts than fine arts are. What is your view on the whole topic?
I think also maybe good to state I'm also associated with Dekmantel, so people like what this idea has to do with rave culture.
You were actually you were responsible for the amazing Dekmantel campaign they had last year and this year, of course, as well.
So I think, I mean, from like a design perspective, I really agree what you're saying, that it's also like a great platform. I actually started as a designer, as a young designer, working for Trouw, working on Trouw and the posters for Carlos Fodes. But I think it's also like it's also, if you look at sort of like the certain design aesthetics today, club culture has been hugely influential in shaping the aesthetics. If you look back at those old rave flyers, it's a very much appreciated reference across contemporary designers of today. So I think, and also indeed with video art, for instance, I mean, electronic music is a very well-suited medium almost for these kind of video expressions.
Yeah, but then again, and I think that's why it's interesting to have you at the table. Heading a research lab like SPACE10, design as a whole has moved into this more speculative discourse. So do you think that there's a place for the questions that you're asking yourself now at SPACE10? Is there a place for that in nightlife as well?
Yes, I guess so. I mean, I think it's like we're basically dealing with how will we live in the near future, and I think that is sort of like affecting a lot of different discourses, including nightlife. So sustainability, also in relation to festivals, is a huge topic, I would assume. But also technology, right? Like we discussed the rise of smartphones, and also in this pandemic world, how do you do a festival when it cannot be physical is also quite interesting question. So there are definitely correlations between sort of like the more speculative work I'm doing within the context of SPACE10 and for club culture, I guess.
Yeah, is a club or a festival, can it be a platform for these kinds of questions? Should it be a platform, or should we just let it be and grow organically? Or can we actually activate the club as a catalyst for answers? I'm looking around the table.
I'm looking at you.
Yeah, I'm looking at you.
Was there an answer to the question already?
Yeah. Could be. I don't know. Zippora, what do you think? Because you actually, what I find interesting, especially when you look at the artists that you've worked with for Fort Vijfhuizen, a lot of them actually have, one leg into the club culture, and we know each other from like going out mostly in Amsterdam. So I know that you're always interested in what comes out of nightlife as an art form.
Well, I had to think about we all bring, whether you're curators or artists or designers, you always bring your personal experience with that. And I had to think of my childhood, which was my parents, they are both artists, performing artists, and but also autodidacts. So I was always in this like situation of being either in transit or in an after, or backstage. Somehow this gave this kind of perspective to also art practices or artistic practices in general, which is of course also making music, what can happen there. And that this indeed is these in-between places outside the norm, if it's possible, to kind of create new things that are, as you say, about failure, experiment, or all these things that aren't so easy to value in the system right now. And I think these places can be a platform of challenging and tackling these questions that come out of the system. The only problem is, as we already said, that how do you not become part of that system in a way that it doesn't matter anymore. If you, it doesn't become anymore that space, not necessarily a safe space, but this kind of in-between space where you can freely think about these challenges. And this is, I don't have an answer to that, but I think that if you're all kind of aware of that, this already brings a lot. And I think experience is important in that you cannot just, appropriate nightlife into the museums. You somehow have to be genuine in that part of it. You cannot ask a programmer as a freelancer to just come do things, but you need to have a few people in the core of a, let's say, a museum that understand what this is about, what it is to be maybe different than most people in power also.
But I do like the edginess sometimes to just look up. What we did at Trouw back then, I think it was curation.
Yeah.
And to curate something sometimes can bring just one world into the other world and deal with it. That's the way we approached it. I remember sitting with Bart Rutte, the curator, while we had set everything up and just opened up the door. People didn't know the space at all. It was always closed. So we were just sitting there and opened the door and we're checking out people who just walked in with their glasses. And I'm like, what's this for kind of, hey, there's art there. Oh, we go in. Oh, I'm going to get my friends. Oh, we go in together. Oh, we're going to dance here. We do something, And I think then you can see what the difference is between showing the same Sarah Morris art piece in the Stedelijk or in a place where it's nightlife and people are drinking, using drugs, are with friends. They experience art in such a different way, and I think that is exactly what I find very interesting. So one time we also had like dancers who were dancing in Trouw all night. I think it was a group of like 25 people. We brought them when the Stedelijk opened up in the space in the Stedelijk. So they kept on dancing in the Stedelijk in daytime, and people were just walking in the auditorium like, what's this, And the people were like really, and that sounds like as if it's staged too much, but it's also connecting worlds, and that I find really interesting.
Yeah. Then again, to go back to because you actually, or no, Zippora, you said it, experimentation, failure, and there's actually a quote by you, Lena, and by your collaborator, Tara Cesny, who you run Phantom Kino Ballet with. It's this installation piece that changes form in whatever context you place it. But you said about Phantom Kino Ballet, it's like we're more than happy if things are a little too much and you don't want things to be too pleasant all the time. And I think, but that's also a personal way of seeing what contemporary art needs to be for me, is that it is unpleasant and that it is sometimes, difficult to watch. But are clubs then, or festivals, still the place where we can look for that friction? Because I think that is also what good art does. It kind of challenges you as a viewer, and then yes, of course, when you're on ketamine, maybe the world looks a little different. But I wonder if in this day and age, with clubs, and unfortunately we haven't had a nightlife in a while, but with clubs being, part of this capitalist system, they need to make money, they need to generate audiences, bigger and bigger and bigger. Is there still room for this kind of like antagonizing feeling that art should sometimes have?
Should be,
yeah. Well, I'm also like talking from my own experience, curating in clubs where if an installation would be problematic, if it would cause some agony, then it would always be, toned down a little bit or moved, or which I don't think is the intention of what art should do. How do you feel about that?
I think that's a good point. And this is also what I meant a little bit with accessorizing, that feeling I have sometimes that art is used to pimp up the profile. I mean, this is like something which can happen. It doesn't have to happen, but it can happen that it is used to attract maybe like a little bit kind of to draw an artsy image and attract maybe more people, also for economic reasons at the end, you know. And therefore art becomes decoration, and this is something which is not interesting. So what the edgy side of it, and I was also wondering with our project, for example, you need to sit down and look at it, and you have to have you need to spend time with it. It's not something you can experience by just passing by. So what we did, we were programmed like within a program of a night. We always started, because it's a video plus installation plus performance, and it's an hour long. And because of the installation, we always had to start, but afterwards there was a concert, an electronic concert, or a DJ started to play. So we were the beginning of the night, and people arrived and they had to sit down and watch this. So they were allowed to leave as well, of course. But it is, this is also something like not only the content is challenging, but also it demands the time of the viewer. And I have sometimes a little problem with like just like putting
visuals.
Just putting visuals, unless you work really close to the musician or the DJ. You work together. This is another topic. But I was wondering, I mean, there are art forms which might work better, and this is always, I think, related to what demands the time. You have to, you are in a competition with something very entertaining, and that's the party. You know, so if you are on Kettleman just walking by and this is like flashy lights, and I don't know if you really get what the artist wanted to make you see, or what the artist message. I don't know. So of course it's the
and sometimes art is made that way. For festivals, for instance. That's also an art form. But it's made for especially that, I think.
And it's also, I mean, art can also be, I mean, it becomes part of the world, of a reality of daily life, and daily life can be nightlife then, and then it can function in that way, maybe too. It depends, of course, of the artist and the way someone works, but I mean, in many cases, especially at Trouw also, but also at Kunstfort right now, I'm trying to place things that kind of fit in different kind of situations, because you have different kind of visitors anyway, that bring their own, vision and perspective. But of course, it requires carefulness in some cases.
And also willingness of the artist to be, experienced in a different way. So, like, I think it is up to curators to have long conversations with the people that you invite to make sure that you meet their needs, but also, be realistic about the expectations that they have, or the audience that will encounter their work. And I think we can also pull this again a little bit larger in the sense that when we're talking about contemporary art as a moving wallpaper and just there to satisfy people, I mean, we live in an economy where everything is about the experience, and about the experience that should be sort of pleasant almost, it's like this, creating this docility, so as long as there's an experience, we're all happy. I don't know if you want to comment on that, and maybe I'm looking at Bas because you're an experienced designer.
Before I do, I just when you were speaking about like this collaboration between sort of like the artist and sort of like the musician, I immediately had to think of Aphex Twin, which I think there are actually ways where or forms where sort of like the moving wallpaper, as you stated, goes beyond, and actually sort of like the visual really becomes part of the identity of the artist, and really is elevated as such. So I think there are definitely ways also in terms of experience, right? Like I remember a night at Strijp Eindhoven where Aphex Twin was performing with some very, very intense visuals combined with very, very intense music, and then suddenly it doesn't become like a pleasant experience, but it becomes like almost like a Gaspar Noé type of horror scenario where you're in the midst of. So, and that is indeed also an experience, right? So I think an experience in itself is neutral, but I think it very much depends on how you treat it and how you execute that experience, and with what which intention you have for it.
Yeah, and then of course with festivals like Strijp, which is an art and electronic music festival in Eindhoven in the Netherlands, you already have that frame, so people kind of expect to be overthrown, or overwhelmed in a different way than when they go to a regular music festival. And I think that is maybe what I want to move towards a little bit, is that I think in the recent years, the reason for festivals and clubs, like Lena, as you said, to program art is sometimes, I mean, they followed kind of the example of Trouw, who did it in a very, I think, very respectful way, but also very interesting way. I mean, the works that you showed, kind of really engaged with your audience in a different way. But I think the people that followed suit, and that's where I wanted to refer to that experience economy, it really is only about creating a pleasantness, I would say, or we have to frame everything, it's like, where do you really encounter this like fringy feeling? And also with the world of art being in turmoil, I mean, if we've not just only are facing a current pandemic crisis, but we're facing so many crises right now, how do we address that in the context of a nightlife, of a festival where everything is almost like this curated towards a hedonistic idea of forgetting and just experiencing pleasure?
Or even maybe not even forgetting, but even activism or the things you're talking about right now, let's say, can get consumed in a way. They become part of this experience of being woke or something, maybe in some cases, whereas it still stays on the surface. Even like a friend of mine at a certain point said, "Are we now just consuming Black Death?" On social media, when the Black Lives Matter movement started in the spring and summer. And this is, I mean, it's very heavy to say something like that, but I think it can happen. There's always this risk of, from still maybe some cases privileged positions, kind of consuming, being nightlife, fringe, etc. But are you actually engaging with the risks that people maybe now or also in the past have taken to kind of create these free spaces? And what I would say is that it makes sense to always address that part too. And maybe, I mean, in communities you can also say it one-to-one to people, but to be just, genuine about that and clear about it. Are we just only consuming things, or are we actually genuinely addressing things? And can this made is or is it allowed to also do that in a way that is doable, because there's so big crisis. I mean, you cannot always have only the sorrow of it. You can also see the beauty of things that are happening. So it's many things that are happening there. I think you can address it, but you have to be realistic and also honest about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that is the transparency, or like if we would say honestness is also part of this more transparent culture. I think that is sometimes what is lacking. Yeah. And then when you see this, the ongoing trend of like, the club turning into museum and the museum turning into club.
And also, I mean, especially in the Netherlands, this is the case, of course, with all this public funding, at least going to the museums, which then kind of drips into the nightlife, that there's always this question of kind of taking the social responsibilities that maybe government is not always taking. So we kind of put it into the face of this crisis and that crisis happening in society to deal with that. And we also want to deal with that. So this is like also this position. But yeah, there is. It is important to think about it, where this happens and how you want to do it, and also be careful maybe for narcissism, which also comes out of this very online visual world where you become narcissist maybe about taking a position, and I mean, because that's maybe one of the challenges when not becoming capitalized, that your ego is getting in the way of all the nice things that also can happen in a community, which are less about ego.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, and the reality is, I mean, I actually didn't prepare a question because I was like, I don't want to keep talking about COVID and the current crisis that we're in, and just want to have a conversation about art and nightlife. But the fact is that we've been missing that nightlife for, about 8-9 months now. And what does that leave us with? I mean, where do we go to still challenge ourselves?
I mean, one of the good things, I guess, is, that depends on your stand, but I think there has been a rise of underground rave culture and people organizing illegal raves, and I think it's also very interesting in regards to sort of like this surveillance culture and everybody carrying like a mobile device with them. So like a lot of these parties have been actually localized because people are transmitting data over the network, and thus the government officials could find them. But I mean, there's also then the next step in that could be organizing underground parties where everybody takes their phone off and then goes offline, basically, sort of like going back in time. So I think that's could be an interesting development out of this, perhaps.
I'm looking at the DJ again, who basically, had a different path to follow for the last couple of months. You've also been asked to play at underground or illegal raves, and I know that you've actually taken a stand not to participate in them. Do you think it is a good development? Because I think the necessity of this underground culture, which I get you, boss. I think I also would applaud the idea of like the do-it-yourself culture again, and that people take, reign of their own, but within limits. And I think what we see right now with these, they've been dubbed plague raves. As well. I'm not sure if they represent that DIY side that I love so much, or do they represent this hedonistic side, like fuck everything and or excuse my language, viewers, but screw you, and I'm just gonna party because I deserve to party. I've actually heard people say that I deserve to have a party because I haven't had a party in 6 months.
There were several questions.
Now, I know.
One is, in general, I have hard times to talk about a positive output from COVID yet, because it seems to be cynical in a way for me, like seeing like all the nice DIY clubs closing because of their financial problems. I have in any way hard times to say there is like something good coming out. It's just like, no, I'm still grieving. Give me this space for it. In general, I agree. It's, but yeah,
it could be a reinvigoration.
I also think what I heard is that these young people, like who organized here in Amsterdam the big raves, they were super good organized apparently, and also transmitted their new location via WhatsApp, so that the police, when they tracked them, they had a big truck with the sound system on, and they would just, like, it was a cat and mouse play. The police arrived, but the ravers were already at the other spot, and but I think it was besides that it was fun for sure. They also made money, big money. I think so.
Yeah,
of course.
At a certain point, it became a money thing. Yeah.
And yeah, so it's not that naive DIY approach we like so much, but yeah.
But I think, I mean, like, and I'm also like, you know, I think I would not go to a rave either. Like, I'm not promoting sort of like raves that sort of like affect public health. But I think there is an interesting movement that people are forced to think in different ways. I mean, the same as we're sitting here now because Dekmantel Festival couldn't happen. I mean, there are, I think, you know, people are being forced to think in different ways. Also, you know, for the broader art and museum and gallery spectrum. I think that is actually a really great thing that may come out of it, and I completely respect also sort of like the moment for grief because, you know, we're not out of this, but you know, there are a lot of, you know, new and interesting things happening because we have to take a different mindset to these, and I think that will have a lasting influence actually.
Do you have a few examples of things that you've seen recently that really inspired you or made you happy?
Well, I think there. I think one thing I really liked was this. Let me think. No.
Although I have to say, that when I looked to your Instagram yesterday, I think your last post was about a screen of death. So that doesn't sound positive.
Well, I mean, it was blue screen of death. It's a classic. Yeah. No, but I mean, I think there, like, for example, right? Like, there have been these Fortnite concerts where Travis Scott played in front of a 14 million people audience live. I think that's a really interesting and progressive movement. Lil Nas X also did it in a different game, and I think that's actually a really progressive take on you know, the experience economy as we're discussing. I think there are actually some really progressive things happening within those fields. And actually, if you talk about accessibility, because, you know, like Fortnite is a free game, suddenly that club culture becomes more accessible in that way for many people. So
yeah, although you still need then access to internet, and there are still limits
for sure,
too.
yeah.
But I do see what you mean. Kim, you've been with Het Hem also, of course, have been struck by the pandemic, and you had to close, or you're at least closing for winter. You're going to resume your program in March, if I can mention that already. How was it for you, and what have you seen any changes, or do you feel that you yourself, as you know, as an artistic director or curator, will maybe change the way that you're programming in the future, or maybe address different things?
I think, I mean, we had to close down. I had to let go most of my team, and then suddenly we heard that as a museum you can open up again. So then I was like, wow, what are we going to do? So we did a crowdfunding. We found Link & Co. And we opened up again. And that was like a crazy time where you make program, and at the same time you communicate your program, you find partners, because we opened our doors to other institutes that did have program but didn't have the space anymore, and we have a lot of space. So that I find in the end very interesting, because you get into collaborations that you may have not thought of before. And we could explore our music program in this period of time in a very free way. So we have the dynamic range bar downstairs, and we took out, as you know, the sound system and put it up in the cafe. And here you get to the edgy point, like how can you program music in a space where a lot of people just walk around, and how can you get them to have the attention? Well, the sound system helps a lot. It's a great sound system.
Macintosh, right?
No, it's
the Klipshorn.
It's
It's Klipshorn. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to play on it.
Yeah,
but yeah,
and what happened was, so I asked Olaf to
Olaf Boswijk. We used to be your collaborator at
Trouw
Trouw as well.
And we decided to have like an edgy sound. Also have, like, for instance, pretty rough techno, or everybody had to deal with it. Like the Zaankanters who came there to just eat a pie, and they're like in their 70s, had to deal with that sound. So I didn't want it to be the wallpaper that we've been talking about. Music is an art form, and I think if you put it in a space like that, and then everybody has to deal with it, and everybody dealt with it. So that was one of the most exciting things that I found, because then I was like, oh, we can bring this to a next level. We can bring music in as an art form, and that everybody understands that this is an art form. Because that's something I think people tend to forget. Also, in this whole period of time, where it's very easy to just say, we just close the clubs because they're messy anyhow, we open a gym, go to the gym, not to the club, you know, and I get really frustrated by that, because there's so much more to it, you know, and I still don't hear the right voice going to politicians who usually close their doors at 8 at night and don't understand what's happening and how important it is. They think it's superficial. That's something that I'm just saying, and I'm not sure if every politician would feel that way, but I feel that's the large group of people who don't understand the importance of nightlife, that don't understand the breeding process that is going on there, that don't understand how important it is for especially young people, but also older people. I mean, in Berlin there are many, it's a bigger group probably, but still I feel as if I'd rather have these people who are organizing these illegal parties to step up and say, like, no, this is ours, we need this. This is our gym, you know. We kind of, what is needed, you know? Do we need like a better ventilation system? We will make a better ventilation system. Do we need to have like, we organized this year also a dancing.
I was also part of that.
Maybe you should tell about that,
well,
because it was quite an
interesting.
intense experience.
It was a very intense experience. I just realized that I actually never introduced myself to the viewer of this panel, but I'm a radio broadcaster and a curator, and at night or sometimes during the day I DJ. And there is a curator called Bogomir Doringer who organized an event at Het Hem called The Dance of Urgency. And the idea was for a group of 50 people, dancers, to come in, to stay at Het Hem for a night, to be part of lectures and workshops on a Saturday, and then on a Sunday we would have our Dance of Urgency, an experiment in raving through a pandemic crisis. And it was really interesting The room itself had a DJ booth and then a few seats where people could rest. And then there were circles drawn on the floor, and each individual dancer had its own circle to dance in. I have to say, I came in on Sunday afternoon. Orfeo the Wizard was playing, and it felt like I entered Berghain at 3 p.m. in the afternoon on a Sunday. Yeah. It was so intense. And actually my first reaction was recoil. Was like, I'm not sure if I can be part of this. I've also I haven't seen people rave in months, so it was really strange to be there. But once I was up, and I had no choice. I just had to go and put on records. Although I prepared it as this experimental music relation between movement and not moving. So I didn't bring any club or rave music, but then kind of had to go with the flow, which was a scary thing. But what surprised me most, and also what hit me most, because it was a very emotional experience, was the need for the people that were there to connect with me and to connect through the music, and the will, and when it's not even a will, the lust, I would say, or that inner need for catharsis and for movement that was there. It was intimidating, it was scary, but it was also amazing and wonderful.
Yeah, I thought so too. Yeah, and I think what we wanted to do was see how, well, clean is not the right word, but how can you, because the problem with clubs in a COVID perspective is that people use drugs, they drink, they want to be social, they want to get together. And what I wanted to see was where is the tension of, personally, I really want to dance. And I could get rid of the drinking and all the other stuff to just be able to dance and listen to music.
Yeah.
So we started up with the bar. You can drink, you can come in with your friends, and we took it out, every hour we took something out. No drinking, no bar, you have to go in alone, you have to be in a circle. And then suddenly it was very strict. And what I found most exciting about it was it became dancing sessions. It was not clubbing, it was dancing sessions. You could be social somewhere else, but this is the people really want to dance. They can stay there for hours, and you connect with the DJ and you connect with the people around you because they're always at the same spot. So if you dance 1 hour, you know that there's this guy who really likes it when this kind of sound comes up, or and you connect with strange people, and somehow it got so intense, and I was so surprised by this intensity. And I think it's true what you say, it was the first time for a lot of people in a long time to be dancing and to be connecting like that. Yeah. So. But then I'm okay, but here it is, this is what we can do in clubs right now. Yeah. I mean, it's the safest, if you have good ventilation system, it's the safest way to dance and be together, because you connect with your eyes and your bodies, you don't need to touch, this is enough.
Well, and it kind of connects back to what we were saying about nightlife as a form of art in itself. Where I was talking to my partner yesterday, and he was like, "Oh yeah, remember that Wagner, when he described what opera was for him, kind of can also, could be translated one-on-one onto what a performance with a DJ is and a relationship with an audience, and that you're actually part of this Gesamtkunstwerk, so that it is an art in itself." And I think that is what I experienced on that Sunday afternoon.
So I feel like the thing is that a lot of people, I think, who are not connected to nightlife really think it's superficial, and maybe these are the people who decide that it's not important. And I wish that the voice of nightlife would be more strong at this moment to to say like, hell no, we're more than that. We have to stand up and get together, and we have to find a way to go through this, because I seriously don't understand why I can go to Bikram yoga and not to the club. Really, I don't understand, and I don't want to make like all the decisions that are made, like what we can do and not can do. I don't feel like I have to get into that too much, because there's always a reason why something is on and off, or but for clubbing, I'm getting frustrated now. I think there must be ways.
And also, I mean, we talked about the club as a curated space, but it is also an incubator, and especially if in historical context, it has been an incubator for so many artists to come out. I mean, like Lee Bowery probably being the most well-known example for it.
Definitely.
And Zippora, I'm then looking at you as a curator. Do you feel that without nightlife, we're cut off from, a generation of artists that use the nightlife as their stage?
We probably are, as the stages are not accessible for everyone right now. I think what is interesting, what Kim's saying, this is like this place for, incubating, breeding, but also, I think in the Netherlands, the government is, of course, thinking about all these places as entrepreneurship, and that's the language we can talk about it. But it's not just that; it's more than that, and it's not only about nightlife and club culture, but performing arts in general. Of course, all the orchestras and all the theaters, they are actually falling down right now. This is like totally awful, because when you're talking about a pandemic and a virus, you're talking about something which is happening to the body, and all these art forms are connected to the body more than visual arts, to be like strictly visual arts. To be fair, it's really about all your senses, sensations, sensibilities coming together there. It's about connection, and I think it's really overseen how affecting this is for health. I mean, artistic health, mental health, and also physical health. And if there would be more of an organization of all these components of the performing arts, including nightlife and club culture, going towards the lobby and also explaining that part of it, that would be helpful. But as you were saying, also like this hedonistic, individualistic part of nightlife, but I think also in general of reality kind of gets in the way of that. We're still kind of grieving, healing from, okay, what has happened to us and how can we now reorganize and then do something. But I think this Gen Z kind of inventiveness about organizing a rave, and like you're saying, this design part of it, if you could use that for getting them to know that you can still influence the institutions and the positions in power, that would be helpful. But there's a huge gap in generations there. Like, I think this whole Gen Z generation doesn't even maybe believe that we can still influence politicians, whereas that is exactly what we're doing right now in a way already.
I wanted to say, I mean, there's this whole like TikTok generation that have, been instrumental in like not getting Republican rallies from the ground or disturbing them. So they should feel this empowerment. Although I have to say, you've also been critical, not necessarily of the generation itself, but of the mechanism, that kind of also propagates this complete idea of self-portrayal, and it's all about this individualism. How can we break through that? And also, like, can we, as a cultural field, can we really make a change? And are we addressing the right topics right now, for instance?
Well, for me, it's very important to regain trust between many groups and individuals and generations, because there's all these gaps and segregation happening. People feel like really left alone right now, also in all these kind of topics of, also about abuse, of course, and violence in nightlife and in the art world happening in the Netherlands. And there should be this kind of, I think we as people that are visible and are able to actually give platform to other voices, we should show we are on the side of maybe safety, but also of community and recognizing where the work is done. And let's get together, let's organize in this, because right now I feel in some cases people don't feel heard anymore. by anyone who is in power, and of course as a curator, but also me as the director of an institution, I am in power in a way. But behind the scenes, and you all know this, we are like working really hard to also represent these other voices in all these like closed doors power positions, and this is happening. It's just, it should be known, and we should regain this trust, and I think work needs to be done on all sides. It's not just, in some cases not, I mean, I really understand the feeling left alone, especially when it's about violence, and I just hope that people can see work is done. But sometimes not so visible that it can be on Instagram all of a sudden. Sometimes it's like a long process of changing things, and it is happening. We just need a sense of community a little bit back. But it's of course difficult during Corona.
Well, that and I also think is should we have more conversations? I think right now what we see, of course, and especially when we're talking about safety or about non-safety in this case of like nightlife in the art world, it still seems very hard to have that discussion amongst each other, and it's like it seems sometimes like a one-sided conversation where we're only reacting on what someone said in an Instagram post. I sometimes have a trouble with like how do we start this conversation? Should we make it visible in our work, in the way that we curate and that we select people? How do we do that? Lena, is it something that I was wondering with Phantom Kino Ballet? You've showed it and it's been performed in various art spaces. Do you think it's ready to really enter the club world as well, or is it something that you want to keep apart and that's part of the dialogue you're not looking for?
We already performed in clubs as well, in San Francisco and Tokyo. We were part of the program of the night. Like after us, the DJ followed, and the dance floor was open. What was your question again?
I'm also trying to rephrase the question. No, I was thinking it's more about the dialogue, but that it is interesting what you said, and you said it before. It's like, we were put, as the start of the night. You said like your audience for Phantom Kino Ballet needs to actively listen. But I was wondering, can't that listening also happen at 5 a.m.? Does it need to be always in front of the night, or is that just the way that we're conditioned?
Okay, this was. We wanted to have it like this because we have an installation where people sit on a fabric, and we have a certain choreography, how we walk through the audience. They have to sit in our installation, and it takes time to just dismantle it. Yeah. And to have it, but also to set it up. So to have it in the middle of the night or at the end would just like disturb. So you would have to close the room, and it's that's why
it's
more
just
like practical reasons exactly.
Because
so
it
the
is
idea and this we also thought about it with Sarah to work on a different concept where we can more interfere and also surprise, like just showing up like in the middle of the night and doing something. So we worked on a second performance where we don't have so much of an installation involved, and this is next step.
And then it's also about having that voice, because it is a very engaging piece as well. I mean, there's multiple voices to be heard that you could also engage with at a later moment in the night. It doesn't necessarily have to be at the beginning. I'm just wondering, I'm moving towards, because we are moving a little bit towards the end of our conversation about art and clubs and nightlife and festivals. And I just maybe wanted to think about what are ways to move forward, looking at, we basically have a blank slate now. So, if we pick up the pieces again in, let's say, March, hopefully March, May, April, May, spring of 2021, where should we be heading to? And what is the space for art in this context? It's a big question. I also don't know the answer. I mean, just want to put it out there. It takes time. I think it's also. And then someone mentioned, if it was either one of you who said the grief that we're going through.
It's so difficult to look in the future somehow. I feel because we've the past months. It's just been reactive a lot, and to be suddenly throwing your ball somewhere and go like where you used to be. I find it difficult because that's what lies in this question. I find it difficult to say, this is how we're going to do it. Somehow, I don't have the answer.
Yeah. No, and I also think when you look at, the nightlife specifically and the larger cultural field in general, I think there are ways that we could, as being part of the system, can install to maybe see if we can take things a certain direction, but sometimes you also just need to let things be and kind of, as I said, sometimes if the nightlife and festival world is this incubator for something larger, something new that we don't see yet, then we maybe need a little bit more time. I think that is something that I would wish for the world is a bit more time to reflect, and also to, Zippora, you mentioned the word failure as an experiment. If we give ourselves more time for that, and also to be, that experiment could be part of a public discourse. It doesn't.
If we can afford time, this for some people that's doable, for some it isn't, and well, that's what it is. If I could say something about this, I mean, art in general, so music, nightlife, visual arts. I mean, for me, it gives me air. It's really, I love art. It's just any kind of art. Also, being part of this imagination of an artist is getting it into your body, or listening to it, or seeing it. For me, it's very inspirational and beautiful. And I just hope that as people that are curating that, setting the framework for this, we can kind of curate an environment where this can actually happen, where where art can be made, where work can be done, where the parameters are such that this is possible. And this is, if you're asking me or us, what do you wish? I just hope we can kind of get a little bit more rid of all the noise, but also the bad things, and just create a place where, or create a world in general, actually, where art can happen and be made, and where work can be done. That for me would be like a very idealist
I'm
wish.
with you.
Yeah,
I think you are. I know you are. And it's a challenge, but it also isn't, because there are many people doing that.
Yeah.
I just know everywhere. Yeah.
Bas, I'm looking at you.
I'm just hoping for that summer of love, basically. I'm like, hopefully we can,
touching.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, Woodstock for our generation, basically.
Yeah.
That's my dream scenario, but
To socialize.
but basically what you're just describing with sort of like that collective performance art.
Yeah.
But then with 10,000 people.
Yeah.
I think that would be a fantasy, but I think to your point, I think we need a little bit of patience for that.
Yeah.
Even more
patience and time for experiment and failure. So that rounds up our panel talk about art and the way it influences nightlife and festivals, and the other way around. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and have a great day.